Portal 2 is the greatest video game sequel, if not greatest video game of all time. From the story to the design to every single tiny detail, everything about Portal 2 is utterly perfect and just works. But why does it work? What inside the game makes Portal 2 work more so than any other game? Well, hi, I'm Charlie, I'm back, and let's find out why Portal 2 works. Portal 2's development picked up almost right after the first Portal. The first Portal was always just a part of the orange box, whereas for Portal 2, they went in wanting the game to truly be its own thing. Portal didn't have a large group working on it, maybe around 7 or 8 people constantly working on it, whereas Portal 2 had 30 to 40 people. People really wanted Portal 2 to be the next big thing. They truly wanted to reinvent what Portal was with Portal 2, and it all began with a gameplay mechanic they called f-stop. The main thing? Valve wanted to remove portals from Portal. Now, as ridiculously stupid as that sounds, as removing portals from Portal would just make the game into another game that Valve already makes, Half-Life, f-stop did lead to some interesting stuff. And it all started because Valve wanted to actually give their developers a bit of a break after doing the Orange Box, which was Portal, Team Fortress 2, and Half-Life 2 Episode 2. They all came out on the same day. That is a lot of work. So while the developers were away, they created stuff that could be used in a potential Portal sequel, and it was called f-stop, or like that was one of the things they did. It's a bit confusing, but that's kind of where it originated from anyway. A mod called Project Capture shows a lot of what f-stop was going to be like and the type of puzzles that would appear. A lot of things would just involve a camera, because f-stop's a camera term, apertures, you get it. Whether that be taking a cube through a door or more, the camera was a major part of f-stop, along with old aperture and the guide being a guy that we'll talk about later in the video, instead of Gladys like from the first game. This was a complete departure from the original Portal, and although the playtesters liked what they saw, they were extremely confused about how this was at all meant to be related to Portal. This just wasn't Portal. This was a completely different game that does take place within the same universe as Portal, which is fine, but it's just weird. So Valve decided to kind of just take what they liked from f-stop and funnel it into a true Portal sequel, picking up where the last game left us off. Kinda. Portal 2's campaign opens with you seemingly in a normal looking room with an announcer talking to you, telling you to do some stretches, look at a painting, and return to your bed. It's a fun little exercise and is nothing like Portal at all, but we still have the quirky little voice just like the original Portal. It seems like they really went in on this f-stop thing. After you return to your bed though, things get weird. You wake up finding out that you may have been asleep for years, if not decades, and someone's knocking at your door. Once you open the door, a core known as Wheatley appears. Wheatley is voiced by Stephen Merchant, well known for creating The Office alongside Ricky Gervais, and my god, his voice fits this character so well. Wheatley is very much a very cheeky core who tries to get away with several things that he says. He mainly introduces you to what the hell happened at Aperture Science while you were gone, and that's especially noticeable when Wheatley takes the little room you're in to the testing track. The wall breaks and holy crap, everything is different. The facility is massive. There's so much stuff everywhere. This is such a fantastic opening. Like, okay, you don't actually get to do anything, but seeing the facility like this is so much more interesting than the little hints at the behind the scenes stuff you see in the first game. Then you break through the wall, a wall that Wheatley thinks is a docking station for some reason, and you enter your first testing track. And holy crap, don't you recognize it? This is the same testing track from the first Portal game. The first few chambers have been recreated in a new overgrown Portal 2 style in order to reintroduce the player to the game. Of course, some little things are changed, like Chamber 1 almost being a completely different thing, with the main gimmick being to press buttons to open portals instead of them opening automatically, and somehow Chamber 4 and 5 are now considered the exact same chamber, and there's no elevator in between. But other than that, these are the same old levels found in the original game. game. A bit of shenanigans go on while getting the first half of the portal gun, but everything else is pretty much the same. However, after we get past the initial test chambers from the first portal, we get newer levels that are just as overgrown as the previous test chambers, but these ones are completely new to Portal 2. They still accomplish the same thing that the test chambers do in Portal 1, introducing you to being able to fling yourself across a test chamber, but it does give someone who played the original game something original for them to play. It's quite fun, and I think it leads to the first thing that really works in Portal 2. The test chambers are designed in a way to not only be fun, but you have multiple ways to beat each chamber. This is something taken straight from the first game, but some of these test chambers involve you thinking how to beat them, and in some cases, you can come up with slightly different ways to beat them. Of course, in the early chambers, there's not a lot you can do because you only have half a portal gun, but each test chamber is different, and each one is fun to go through. Some of these chambers have these random scribbles on the walls that tell you some secret story that happened at some point before you explored these test chambers, and that's kind of something else that also makes Portal 2 really work. All the different things you can find throughout the game to learn more about the backstory behind Aperture Science really adds something to the game that the first game really only had in its last few chambers. Now, after a few chambers, you meet up again with Wheatley, and with Wheatley, you attempt to try and break out of Aperture, but instead of breaking out of Aperture, you accidentally wake Gladys. In case you don't remember, Gladys was the villain of the first game, and she looked like this. Gladys in this game actually got a bit of a redesign. It looks like this. It's not anything major, but it is much better than Portal 1's counterpart. Gladys kills Wheatley, my god, how dare she, and she sends us down a fire pit from our original fight with Gladys all the way back then. So let's quickly recap. We woke up in a room, then went back to sleep, woke up several years later, had Wheatley wake us up, go back to the test chambers of the original Portal, played some new test chambers, found some weird rooms, met back up with Wheatley, awoke Gladys, who then killed Wheatley, and threw you into the old fire pit. That's all within the first chapter of the game. In total, there's 9 chapters in the game. What the Chapter 2 of Portal is straight up just a lot of test chambers, reintroducing you to Gladys, gaining the second half of the portal gun, going through the final test of Portal backwards, and introducing brand new testing elements that are really fun. Some of the new testing elements are the lasers, the reflector cubes, and the aerial faith plates. Each new test element brings a whole new thing to the game that's just so much fun to play. The lasers and reflector cubes are the replacement for the energy balls from the first game, to the point where you actually play through the first energy ball test from the first Portal, but it's replaced with the lasers. But the aerial faith plates are just so much fun. But before we get into that, one of the first laser tests includes a secret radio in a secret room, and the radio plays a song called Exile, Vilify. This song was performed by The National, an American rock band, and written by either Aaron Dessner or Matt Berninger. The internet can't decide. Matt is the person singing in the song, and it's beautiful. It seems like such a random inclusion in the game, just sitting in some random test chamber on a radio in a little den, but it actually has a hell of a lot of history surrounding it. Back during the development of Portal 2, there was an idea floating around about making the game have multiple endings, with some of the endings being right at the beginning of the game. One of these endings involved you shooting a portal on the moon. Foreshadowing. And you being sucked in, and then the credits roll. And the song, Exile Vilify, would be the song that plays during the credits of that ending. This ending, along with all the other endings that weren't the main ending, were removed because nobody was using them. They were just going to the main ending. And that makes perfect sense. I mean, what's the point? The new location of this song was found in Test Chamber 03, but it's meant to invoke the relationship between the player, Chell, and Gladys. The song is such a great listen, but it's very hard to find now. It was taken off of all streaming services, with the only place to find it, legally, in the game. Chapter 3! Chapter 3 is more of the same, introducing more and more testing elements to the game while also continuing on what was previously in the game. However, we start to see the return of Wheatley. He didn't die! Wheatley begins telling you about everything that you missed, saying that he's looking for a way to escape. You gotta get out of this damn place even if it's the last thing you do. In this chapter, we're reintroduced to the sentry turrets. in a pretty much identical level to the test chamber from Portal 1, although I don't think it's supposed to be the same level, but I actually don't know. We are also introduced to the light bridges, which are these cool little bridges that you can walk on and use portals to move their location. There's not that much in this chapter. You just play some test chambers, and Wheatley shows up because he's not dead. Wow, crazy. But that's honestly what's at the heart of Portal. It's all about the test chambers at the end of the day. During the tests, Gladys searches and finds some archives that have 2 people that have the same last name as you. And you know what? They could be your parents. Who knows? She keeps telling us that she has a surprise for us, and I have a feeling it could be meeting your parents. Holy crap, I can't wait.
I made it all up. Surprise.
What the hell? Chapter 4 is a bit interesting. Every test chamber just feels huge compared to anything else we previously played. I don't know if that's the point of this chapter, but it's the first thing I noticed. At least the first 2 chambers are huge compared to anything else in the game. Gladys keeps making you feel bad, and you make it to the second last chamber. This chamber, compared to anything else, is extremely easy. I honestly couldn't tell you why it's so easy.
What's going on? Who turned off the lights?
Wheatley found us! And now it's time to escape. The game and the music truly give you a rush, making you feel like you need to go as fast as physically possible throughout this section, even though it doesn't really matter. Wheatley is pushing you along as you run through these short little sections, whether it be Gladys teasing you with the final test chamber, or being trapped in a room full of turrets. It's all about escaping and rushing through the section as fast as possible. Welcome to the escape. We're getting out of Aperture Science. The plan is simple. We need to disable everything that Gladys could use to kill us. We gotta get rid of the turrets and the neurotoxin. Pretty simple. We also get a lot of lore dumping. But before we get to that, I think we need to talk about the behind the scenes of this place. The behind the scenes of Aperture, as I said during chapter 1, just look incredible here. Although it is mostly just walking through different rooms full of different hidden Easter eggs, it's the same thing I mentioned with the whole expanding story when you go through the different rooms. The game is just so damn expansive and has so much hidden lore and hidden stories found throughout the game, and that's truly why the game works. But what's actually in these rooms? Well, in one room, you actually see the displays from the Bring Your Daughter to Work day, the day that Gladys killed everyone. Most of these displays are of potato batteries, showing how potatoes can power small little things. And honestly, the most impressive is the one that grew into the ceiling. And if we look at who made the display, it's Chell. That's me. Huh. Odd. This could mean that Chell is one of Gladys's survivors, alongside Doug Ratman, or it could mean something else. Don't worry, I'll get to theories later. Anyway, after we replace Gladys's turrets with some defective turrets and get rid of her neurotoxin, we take her head on. This is the final boss of the game, us against Gladys once again. Once we finally get to her lair, and after she discovers what we did, there's now no way to actually defeat us. We replace her head with Wheatley. Wheatley is now in the control of the full facility. We got a man on the inside, and he's gonna get us out of here. And that's Portal 2. Once again, a fantastic game. But a pretty simple and boring ending, I can't lie. But at least we managed to defeat Gladys once again.
Actually, why do we have to leave right now?
I don't even know why I fell for that again. Wheatley then turns Gladys into a potato battery and shoves us down a bit after Gladys calls him a moron. Why would Wheatley do such a thing? I trusted him. I was wrong? And that's another reason why Portal 2 works. The characters are incredible. Each character that appears in the game is just so unique compared to the last, and you truly feel emotion whenever something happens to either Wheatley or Gladys, depending on what part of the game you're up to. The voice actors that play the characters, Stephen Merchant and Ellen McLean, just work so well. The character designs, everything about these characters works so well, and in just these few moments we're about to meet a whole new cast of characters, and once again, they, alongside everything else, makes Portal 2 work. Chapter 6 is the beginning of a new era of test chambers, or an old era technically. These next 2 chapters are so damn interesting, but you kinda need to discuss both at the same time. Chapter 6 has you fall down a massive hole with Gladys as a potato right next to you falling down. You and Gladys discuss maybe teaming up and killing Wheatley, and you land in an abandoned part of Aperture. In this section of Aperture, where you go through several eras of Aperture starting in the 1950s, you're introduced to Cave Johnson, the guy that I mentioned from the F-Star at the beginning of the thing, do you remember? The old CEO of Aperture Science, who has slowly been dying due to moon rock poisoning. Cave Johnson talks you through old recorded messages he made alongside Carolyn, his assistant. Cave Johnson is voiced by J.K. Simmons, just in case you couldn't recognize J. Jonah Jameson, and Ellen McLean voices Carolyn. That makes things a bit interesting, doesn't it? But anyway, you learn more about the history of Aperture the further you go into it, and you manage to find something very interesting hidden somewhere in this section. But we need to first learn about something else. The Borealis is such an interesting part of Portal lore because it has almost nothing to do with Portal. It may be a boat that's owned by Aperture Science, which, you know, is where these games take place, but it actually has more to do with Half-Life than anything else. Let me explain. Half-Life 2 released in 2004 to critical success, so several follow-ups were planned to be created. The first one being a short little tech demo called Half-Life 2 Lost Coast, which isn't really important to anything ever, and then Half-Life 2 Episode 1. Valve was doing Episode 1, Episode 2, and Episode 3. Episode 1 came out, taking place right after the events of Half-Life 2. At the end of the second chapter, you get a message from Dr. Mossman, who seemingly finds some sort of project in an Arctic location. She says that she'll send a transmission of what she found to the White Forest, which is a base where Eli and Dr. Kleiner are now working at. The Combine also get this message, but Gordon and Alex manage to fully get the message and continue on their way to the White Forest. A year later, Half-Life 2 Episode 2 releases alongside the Orange Box, and it follows up on Episode 1. Once you finally arrive at the White Forest, you finally get to see the full transmission of what Dr. Mossman sent, and oh my god, right there is the Borealis, with the logo right next to it saying Aperture Science. The boat was created by Aperture Science, the place you were at in the game that released on the very same day within the Orange Box, and everything seemingly comes together. Apparently, the Borealis contains powerful technology, leaving Dr. Kleiner wanting to use the boat, and Eli wanting to destroy the boat at all costs, thinking that it has something to do with when G-Man told Alex to prepare for unforeseen consequences. Eli thought he was talking about the boat. He wasn't. I don't think, anyway. And then Half-Life 2 Episode 2 kinda ends. Half-Life 2 Episode 2 proceeds to end on a cliffhanger right before you go onto a helicopter to fly to the Borealis. Instead, Eli is stabbed and murdered in front of you and Alex, and then the game just ends. It literally just ends. Years go by, and the conclusion to this saga seemingly gets delayed and delayed, seemingly never coming out. But that brings us back to Portal 2. In Portal 2, right before you rescue Gladys from being attacked by birds, you can find the dock of where the Borealis used to be. Not much is here, and seemingly the boat somehow got teleported out of this dock, but it's an interesting bit of connective tissue between the Half-Life games and the Portal games. Yes, I just explained all of that to explain a empty dock, but at least now you know what I'm talking about. Chapter 6 and 7 are pretty much just huge story dumps. Just like Chapter 5, expanding on the history of Aperture Science in a unique way, Chapter 6 and 7 just do that, but even more so. Walking through the abandoned offices of Cave Johnson and the employees of Aperture Science, seeing all the posters, the computers, and the technology slowly being upgraded, but the main part of these chapters is the gel. In a similar way to the concept of portals themselves, These gels were inspired by the game tag The Power of Paint. This game was developed by students at the DigiPen Institute of Technology, yes, just like Narbacular Drop, and had multiple colors of paint that did different things. Valve hired the entire team behind this game to work at Valve, and they began work on Portal 2. After working on Left 4 Dead 2, they had their priorities, I guess. The gel really helps breathe a whole new life into this section of the game, making it so much more unique than the previous sections of the game, really pushing Portal 2 to a whole new level that it wasn't at before. This, alongside the different theming in all the different sections, really make this game unique and make it work. This section does have its faults though, as in Chapter 7 we experience the worst test chamber put in any Portal game ever. This test chamber is single-handedly the worst thing I've ever had to play. The test chamber is so unbelievably hard, you're just given the white goo, a slightly tilted slab, and your goal is to get up to the top. It's just dumb. I hate it. I always have. Once you get to the top, Cave Johnson talks about combustible lemons. Okay, this test chamber is truly something that just doesn't work in Portal 2 at all. It doesn't work. There's no way around it. Not everything can work. The rest of Chapter 7 has you escape this part of Aperture Science, and that's quite fun. It took me quite a while to figure out how to actually escape during this section, but it's fun having Gladys with you alongside going through all these different parts of the place. But eventually, you make it up to a modern elevator and make your way into modern Aperture once again. Now we're back in modern Aperture, but doesn't it look a bit different? Wheatley has completely taken over Aperture Science, and he's slowly destroying the entire facility. When we eventually catch up with him, he forces us into a new testing track with a surprise at the end that's to die for. I wonder what could be at the end. Is it cake? Shut up, John. How did you even get here? Aren't you meant to be in prison? Chapter 8 has some pretty simple test chambers, I can't lie. They introduced some more interesting stuff, like this blue thing that I can't remember the name of, where you can ride inside of it, and then you can also make it reverse, and it becomes orange, because it's like the colors of the portals. But in the grand scheme of things, the most important thing in this chapter is the story. Wheatley is pulling apart different parts of test chambers, combining them to create even more test chambers, and kinda just destroying Aperture as fast as he possibly can. Things are just being destroyed everywhere, and you kinda just have to make it. It almost feels like you're playing the first Portal again, except at the back of your mind you kind of know that we're all just gonna die at the end. So what's even the point? Each chapter has led you up to this one. The one where at the end, you either die or defeat that idiotic moron Wheatley once and for all. But I mean, look at this test chamber. It's just so easy. All there is a faith plate to get across. Look how fast I can beat it.
Surprise! We're doing it now.
What the hell?
This is the part where he kills us.
Well, I guess that's how it ends. There's no way of escaping. Well, once again, Portal 2 is such a...
Where'd you go? Come back, come back!
I need to stop falling for that. Chapter 9 is all about escaping Aperture Science, and is the final chapter of the game. I'm not kidding this time, and that means I'm about to lose all of your attention, so I think we should talk about the other stuff very quickly that's packed into this game, and then we'll talk about Chapter 9, just so you know you don't stop listening after I talk about Chapter 9. Portal 2 has co-op. It's a whole new campaign that takes place after the game, that, without spoiling, has you play as Atlas and Peabody, two robots that someone has been secretly working on in order to complete a group of test chambers. The co-op also has a DLC called Peer Review, but I've honestly not really played that much of it. I used to play the entirety of co-op whenever I could with friends, but we never actually completed it. We just messed around so much because it was just fun to do so. It was very much something that I think was only put into the game because Portal 2 was released on consoles, as it's very fun playing it couch co-op style. It works really well, but I feel like Portal 2 co-op could be a whole discussion in and of itself. It's pretty much an entire game. But Chapter 9, that's what we've all been waiting for. Portal 2's Chapter 9 is incredible. From Aperture completely destroying around you even more so than Chapter 8, to everything you've learned throughout playing the game so far being used in order to get through, such as the goo, the blue things, portals, and more. Everything in Chapter 9 just feels like a best hits album, but done really well. It just feels so damn fast going through the game, going faster and faster, making sure you don't die to all of these little traps that Wheatley sets up for you, trying to make your way to Wheatley's lair, and once you get there, it's just deja vu. In the original Portal, the goal is to get the personality cores to fall off of Gladys and burn them, whereas in this game, you do the opposite. You need to attach the cores to Wheatley. Once you get to Wheatley's lair and unleash the white goo in order to actually have a portable surface, you shoot the bombs he's throwing at you back at him, which allows Gladys to send in some cores. You attach each one, corrupting him, the core, and giving Gladys the chance to take over the facility once again. However, everything is up to you now. You gotta hit that stalemate button in order to make everything happen. Everything's so quick. You feel like you're going in slow motion. You feel as if everything is just happening in your own time, even though it's very, very quick. Once you get to the button, you're blown up. The button was trapped, and something opens, revealing the moon.
I lost?
No, idiot, shoot for the moon. Literally. You literally have to shoot a portal on the moon, and then Wheatley and you get sent through. You're so close to being sent into the middle of space, dying, but at the last second, Gladys saves you, and you're pulled back into the facility. Gladys sets you free. I mean, first you need to hear an opera performance by some turrets, but you're free. Gladys deletes Carolyn from her system, she starts up the co-op testing initiative, and she sings one more song about how she wants you gone. Okay, now we're actually at the end of Portal 2. There are no false endings this time. This is the end. Okay, so let's go over why Portal 2 works, just in case you forgot. The most important parts are the personality of every character, making you feel like you care about what the characters do and care when characters betray you. The test chambers that are designed in such a unique way that pulls you into the game, wanting you to actually play through it all. And of course all the hidden lore you can find throughout the game, whether it be the Ratman dens or the Borealis, all of the hidden lore wants you to learn more about the world that this game takes place in. The game just works. It really does. And I know last time that I said that I got some fan mail that said something like, you don't actually say why Portal works, you just recap the plot of the game and then say it just works because it works. Well, that's why I explained that time before I said that sentence, why it worked. Maybe watch my explanation again and you might figure it out. Yeah, so just listen to what I said before right now. That's why Portal 2 works, okay? But now, I have to beat the final game in the Portal trilogy. Does this even count?